So welcome to the interactive webinar of Hyarchis about remote onboarding of newcomers. You've seen the fancy title slide. This is the word of welcome literally on your screen. The topic of today's session is the onboarding of new colleagues, something everybody runs into from their professional background or because they've been onboarded themselves. It's a special time, of course, in the world, and that makes it extra interesting to think about what works and what doesn't work, what's difficult and what are new opportunities for doing that from a remote location. Since everybody's remote from each other, as we're working from home, that presents new challenges and also new opportunities. And we'd like to share some of those with you today. So the goal of the session is to share our experience about fully remote or distributed onboarding of new colleagues. That might be clear by now. And the idea is that the outcome of such a session is to gain some insights into what works, to have new questions perhaps to ask in your own processes, and to walk away with an improved sense of what works and what doesn't. We're going to be spending roughly an hour together. We'll have you on your way at 11:15. These are Dutch times, but it works the same way, but 1 hour plus in the next time zone. On the agenda is to share our learnings from 3 different perspectives about that, to go into best and worst things that you could do for remote onboarding, and to wrap it up together to come to some summary of all the insights that we have had together. Now, I've already been talking and scraping my throat for like 10 minutes. I'll be your facilitator for this event, and it means that I'll be taking a look at the time and also help out with structuring questions and making sure that everybody gets to speak and have input where necessary. And then there's my co-hosts Adriaan and Mantas. More about you in a second. And of course, then there's you. It wouldn't be an interactive webinar if there wouldn't be interaction. So we're hoping to optimize for that as well. And in order to make that work, it helps to mute the mic. It's fantastic because everybody's already doing that, including my co-hosts, to prevent cross sounds from coming in. We'll make heavy use of the chat during this session. So if you find the Zoom chat function, send a message saying here it is over there. That can help us field your questions and ideas. Now, to give you a bit of context, as I mentioned earlier, there's 3 of us today. And I found it to be a little bit more appropriate to use actual Zoom screenshots from a meeting we had not too long ago, where everybody's high-fiving each other. I'm doing it only in one direction because I have a screenshot to take, but the other guys are fully committed, high-fiving to the left and to the right. That's always a cool thing to do when you're in a Zoom meeting. My name is Thomas van Zuijlen. I'm an Agile Coach, and joining us today are our new colleague, Mantas Jurkenas, who's a system analyst at Hyarchis, and Hyarchis Chief Operating Officer, Adriaan Hoogduijn. We'll be relating our experiences with distributed onboarding from our perspectives, and you're warmly encouraged to come connect with us if you have any questions afterwards or things that you want to know. Come find us on LinkedIn. We're also curious a little bit about who you are, of course. So if you'd be so kind as to take to the Zoom chat function, open it up, and briefly share with us what your role is. So we want to know who's like in the room. What do you do? I work as a team coach. I like to talk in webinars also. And perhaps you're into HR. It's not impossible given the topic. We're curious to see who you are. So if you can find the chat function and let us know. Additionally, we're curious to find out, are you an onboarder or an onboardee? So maybe you're an HR professional, and I see a marketing coordinator, of course, coming in as well. IT recruiters. I see you, IT recruiters. Respect. That's good. Administrators. Fantastic. So many different roles are faced with this, of course. And then I'm curious, are you usually doing the onboarding yourself, or are you the onboardee being onboarded? Maybe you've just joined a new company, or maybe, who knows, just to get a feel for what's the experience that you've had. We know, of course, it's cheating a little bit that there's definitely one onboardee, and it's Mantas, my colleague, who is here in the call as well, and gives us a cool perspective. Somebody is both of them. Yes, here's an onboardee joining as well. Now, and then I'm also curious, how much remote experience do you have? So we're talking about here, onboarder, I see you. There's also the question of like doing this remotely or doing it by default in like the physical space. Where's the remote experience? Was it completely new for you, or is it completely new to work like this? Maybe you can like put it into a matter of years, of weeks, or perhaps even days. How are you with remote?
Yeah, truth be told, I've never worked remotely. I've never even considered working remotely. After changing countries, I was looking forward to coming to the Hyarchis office, you know, the usual, hi everyone. My name is Mantas Jurgenas, but I usually go by Manti. Uh, Shake hands, have a coffee. But well, the whole situation happened, and it turned out that all of my hellos and good morning coffees, they were happening via Microsoft Teams. So yeah, to answer your question a little bit more directly, no, I've had no remote experience, and I was quite, I wouldn't say skeptical. I was maybe more worried or scared about a few things. So I like the human to human interaction, which of course is quite limited at the moment. You know, thank God for the technologies that we've got at the moment. Yeah, so I joined. Hyarchis has done incredibly amazing with the idea of giving me a welcome pack. So not only did I get my laptop delivered to me, but I also had a nice little box of sweets. When I opened my laptop, I checked my calendar. There were a lot of meetings. For example, my first day, the Monday I started about 2.5 weeks ago, we had a morning coffee. So the whole company logged on. There's there were all of us sitting there with our mugs. Had a quick introduction from everyone, gave my own introduction, and yeah, I didn't know what to expect initially, but it really turned out well. Everyone showed interest. Everyone was happily chatting. I didn't feel like I was being ignored, which was one of my initial worries because I didn't know how would you actually communicate with a group of people, in this case, a group of 30, if not 40. Um, yeah, the whole initial experience was really good. Made me feel welcome from the get-go. On top of it, we had our usual, well, it was kind of business as usual from day one. I was really shocked in a positive way. Um, Opened my calendar, there's meetings. For example, another worry was I wouldn't know how to install all of my software. I receive a laptop and, of course, working with very specific software, but guides were set up. My direct line manager has done incredibly well as well, because whenever, well, just casually every, I don't know, few hours, I would just get a message saying, hey, how are you doing? Have you got stuff to be doing? Whenever I wouldn't know, well, whenever I would be unsure about something, I would have that contact person who I could always message. and ask questions about whenever I would run into any IT problems. Each and single developer has been incredibly helpful. I've shared my screen with them. They've shared their screens. They've taken control of my laptop remotely. Everything was resolved really, really swiftly. Yeah, towards the end of the week as well, even the first week, we had a really nice weekender. So yeah, again, the whole company, just how on my first day, everyone had logged in. On the last day of the week, everyone logged in again. We played some games. So you saw the intro slide where, we were doing our high fives. So got to meet everyone on a more personal level. And yeah, it's been 2.5 weeks. I've only been to the office once, and that was for my interview, well, at least a month ago, if not longer. But I don't feel secluded. I don't feel excluded. I have people I talk to with not about work-related things, just a casual, hey, how you doing? We've got a little morning coffee meeting set up. So yeah, everyone looking out the windows describing the cloudy, murky weather we've got at the moment. It's generally an experience that I would have never expected. I would have expected it, to run into some form of issues quite often. But yeah, genuinely, it's been incredibly smooth.
If ever there was a positive story about getting onboarded, I think that's this one. That's almost too good. I'm super curious to hear a little bit more about it, but perhaps to give all of us a little bit of extra context. And thanks for the story. To give us a little bit more of a context about how that onboarding process was designed and where that took place, we can switch it over to Adriaan. So I have a couple of slides here, and we skipped forward a little bit, but the topic, of course, is what we learned about remote onboarding by onboarding remotely. And Mantas just told about, for the people joining us just now, Mantas just told about how that was, and that he doesn't go to the office clearly, except for the first negotiation. That fits within a certain timeline, right? So here's a super simplified onboarding timeline that we have to give you an idea of who's involved where. The first one on that list is Adriaan, who as the Chief Operating Officer of Hyarchis, kind of has to deal with all of this from the entire perspective, and then at some point the actual person joining, which in this case is Mantas, also gets involved and then has an experience, and I come in a bit later, only when people are actually in the office. So we've just now heard about what it's like to be onboarded, and there were some chocolates involved or sweets, which is always a good thing. But how does something like that come to be? And for that, maybe it's good to zoom out a little bit and go to Adriaan's story. So, Adriaan, can you tell us a little bit about the background and how that experience was for you as the employer and the onboarder in this case?
Yeah, sure I can. I wanted to say with Mantas, it almost sounded too good to be true, as if it is no fun to be onboarded just regularly anymore. So we have to see if he thinks the same way still if he's out of his trial period. We'll see. Just joking, Mantas. And yeah, for me, it was a very interesting, and still is actually a very interesting experience, like the whole quarantine and suddenly have to go remote. I mean, for those who don't know Hyarchis, we're a Dutch company co-located in both the Netherlands and Lithuania. So in the Netherlands, we have our customer-facing, meaning all the commercial operations. In Lithuania, we have our product-facing, meaning all the development activities basically located. And well, that brings us at least one advantage when we went through this whole quarantine lockdown thing. And that advantage was that we already were quite accustomed to working distributed. So all of the tooling that you need and all of the practices that you need in order to work remote and distribute it in a successful way, they were already there, fortunately. So I have to say that the transition from going, all of us working in the offices that we have to all of us going to work from home that went pretty smooth. As a matter of fact, we did that within a single day without any interference of our services or product deliveries or projects that were ongoing or even the hiring process that we were having. So all of that went, to my surprise and to my great satisfaction, actually super smooth. But then, everyone's working from home, and that's where the trouble actually starts. Because if it lasts 1 week, that's fine. If it lasts 2 weeks, that's fine. But at some point, it starts tiring you when the kids keep on shooting their Nerf guns at you, or your dog keeps on crawling on your lap and keeps on eating your headset, for example, and things like that. So that's where the trouble kind of kick in on a personal level from the people who are not used, including myself, to using their home as everything nowadays. So I think always that if I look at my situation currently, my home is my office, my home is my gym, my home is my restaurant, my home is my relaxation space, it's my relationship place, basically everything that I typically distribute over perhaps a few tens of places all of a sudden came together in one single place. And suddenly you realize that your house is like 10 times too small, basically. But that's a whole different problem. I think for me, going into the lockdown, my main emotion was shit. Screws up a lot of things that I had ongoing at that moment of time. And somehow I feel super negative about this. And I feel like the only thing I'm doing all day is managing my way around it. If ever there was a moment that my wife should have considered to divorce me, I think it was the first week of quarantine, because it was absolutely the most unpleasant version of myself as you can ever imagine, I believe. But 2 weeks in the quarantine, I also started realizing that actually it gives as much as you take. It took me a while to realize that, but after 2 weeks, I realized hey, we're living in super extraordinary times. It's like a once in a century pandemic that we're living in. And probably the skills that I'm gaining right now and that I'm so frustrated about are probably lifetime kind of skills that I'm going to carry with me the rest of my life as a lesson, that I'm not sure yet what that lesson will be exactly, what benefits I will have of those lessons in the post-corona era. But I do know that we're living in a time which is really extraordinary and probably will leave me with some sort of ideas, skills, lessons, or whatever that gonna have a significant impact on not just me, but on society as a whole. So, hey, wait a minute. It's super inconvenient. And yes, I had to cancel all my holidays, had to cancel all my trips. I was suddenly locked down in Lithuania while I'm typically dividing my time 50-50 between the Netherlands and Lithuania. I was not able to do a lot of the things that make life fun for me, but I thought, hey, this is a once in a century experience. I cannot really change anything about it, nor can anyone else. So let's try to make the best out of it. And let's try to at least find some, gems in there of lessons that I can take away there. So remote working for me gives as much as it takes, because what Manta said basically also, it's like business as usual, but at the same time, absolutely nothing remains the same. And for me, there was, yes, the onboarding part where we had Mantas together with 2 other people, one in the Netherlands and one in Lithuania joining us simultaneously, which presented quite some issues. But at the same time, we're working on an altogether different project for one of our clients where we had to assemble an entire team from scratch. And of course, we decided somehow to start doing that exactly at the beginning of this whole lockdown. So there we are, having to recruit an entire team, have to mold together an entire team, have to onboard and entertain that team, have to make sure they get their equipment, having to make sure they get their sweets, chocolates, onboarding packages. Well, nothing is really working at that moment of time. And then also still minor detail, making sure that our customer gets onboarded on the project and gets acquainted with those people that we've all been hiring. So I have to say that was a few of the more stressful weeks of my life that went by there during quarantine. But it at least made sure that I was entertained and could suffer my days through at home. And I think a few of the takeaways that I wanted to give really about what are things that have been giving for me. The thing that in these times, like I think one of the predictions is that, the divorce rate will go up significantly. And I think that's obvious because, these are times in which you sort of need to cut all the crap. And I think in interviews, that's the exact same thing that happens. If people are looking for a job in the first place in these times, I think it says a lot already about their resilience and about their determination as a personality. And I think that I never had this efficient interviews as I had in this particular time slot, because you really understand that, you need to come down to business. It's the worst possible time to waste anyone's time, really. And that really made it for me very easy to get to the core of what someone is driven by and how someone responds to this extraordinary situation that we're in. And at the same time, like, as it shows resilience and shows courage also to be looking for a job, it also shows you very much like what a personality is really made of. So how does he or she deal with the situation that we are currently in? And I think that where typically, especially in IT recruitment where we are in, there's a big emphasis on technical skills. I think more than ever, we've been looking at personalities in this recruitment round, basically, because we realized, like, yeah, if they are able to, find their job and, take all the sacrifice that come along with switching jobs, like in this particular time frame, yeah, then these are probably people that we can build on because they're independent, they're self-sufficient, and they're bringing a lot of the other skills that we as a company are kind of looking for. So that was one thing. I think another takeaway for me that was very important is that with the team building was, of course, like you typically, have your set things. So if you're in Konus, you go to basketball, you go go-karting, you go to an escape room, you go to a restaurant, you go to bars or whatnot, But now you suddenly had to be creative because all of your usual, let's say, habits could not be implemented or executed. And so we had to come up with something else. And the funny thing is there that what I noticed is that because it was a first time for everyone to do this entirely remotely, we all had to go through a first-time experience. So for me, it was, for example, we had a team building exercise that we finished with Counter-Strike. Well, I'm not like the most gamey people out there, so I didn't even know what Counter-Strike was. And I happened to play a video game at the end of our team building session that was the first time in 20 years. And then I feel really old when I say that, but it's true. Probably maybe 19 or 17 for that matter. I don't know, but it was a long time. Let's say it feels like 2 decades ago that I actually played a video game. So that's just very funny. And it puts me through a first time experience with people who are going through that kind of first time experience as well. So I really start understanding that the team building actually was a lot stronger and a lot more engaging because you go through first time experience together, very much like how you go through hazing experiences when you would, for example, join a student association or some sort of other association. So that was actually a very insightful way that by having first-time experiences together, the team building becomes a lot more meaningful, basically. So that actually was not only possible to do entirely remote, I think it was way more fun, way more bonding, and I got to know the people a lot better than I would typically have in physical team building activity. And as a last takeaway for me is we had this big customer that we need to get onboarded. So imagine we just start with a team of 5 guys, including Thomas and myself. It's 7 guys. And then we basically are going to work for a company that has 300 people on the payroll. So typically, if you come there 7 men strong, knock on the door, are being received into their office, then you have to face basically a dominant culture to which you need to adjust yourself. And that, of course, creates a lot of social instances in which you really feel that you're being, let's say, the guest in someone's building and that you're servicing another company and like a lot of these typical supplier customer kind of elements to the relationship. But to me, understanding that everyone had to work from home, it was super efficient to actually merge the people from the client side and our own people together very quickly because everyone's sitting at home behind their screens. It really was, I think, the most equal possible playing field I've ever operated in because everyone was kind of in the same ship. There was no dominant culture that could be enforced. There were no stupid jokes in place that everyone understood except us. And all these minor things basically created like a super efficient process in which also understanding that, again, it was a first-time experience for both our customer and ourselves. It created like a super efficient onboarding experience for the client. So for me, I would say that that's the let's say getting straight to the core or cutting the crap, as I would like to say, is one of the takeaways for me. I think another takeaway for me is that the team building becomes a lot more meaningful because of the first-time experience, and the customer onboarding goes a lot more efficient because of the equal playing field that we have. So these are kind of my main takeaways, I guess, for so far.
All right. Interesting to hear these contrasts already. So I will get back to the both of you because the next segment will be like a conversation about this, because I'm sure that people hear things and think, but how did they do that? Or was it really that good? Now I feel the same way, and I think that there's something nice to explore and to flesh out these learnings so that you can make use of them yourself as well. I'm shortly weighing in with the perspective to add on to that from my side. Like as I showed you on the slide previously, I come in a little bit later in this stage, so I'm not involved with the hiring process or with the actual hire or the rock hard, apparently very to the point contract negotiations. But once people actually start, yeah, then of course they need to still be onboarded. And Matas already referred to having a package ready, like a physical package for people to need their equipment. But then, of course, there's also the matter of like how do you understand where to go in the digital space, if not in the real space, who to talk to for what purpose, and that requires a different kind of preparation from the company side. And one of the things that we've talked about in this case is to make sure that there's sort of a going from a push to a pull, so creating a little bit of a backlog of things to find out in your first week or weeks for new joiners. So of course, there's lots of knowledge transfer going on, right? So especially within development-oriented companies, people like talking about knowledge transfer as if it's something like to just connect two heads together and then that's how it happens. That's not really the case. Usually that leads to a lot of presentations and meetings and sessions at a whiteboard where somebody explains you the business model, and then you have to struggle to stay awake because that happens for you an entire week. It's always tough to take the rough edges of that, and this now provides an opportunity to use that level playing field, but also to involve the new joiners. So one of the things that I really enjoyed seeing at Hyarchis was like a list of tough questions that new joiners were given. I say tough questions. It's just my way of speaking. It's just questions like, where do you go if you find like a bug in a system? Who do you talk to for topic X or Y? And these were like a fox hunt principle, if you will, things to find out as a new joiner, to make it a little bit less of a like one-way street, but also think, okay, well, by the end of the week, I better have some semblance of an idea of where this needs to go, and where I can find this information. So turning that around, and you can go really deep with it and have backlogs per topic, but it can also just be a simple like a 10 question list. Will also give your new joiners an opportunity to actually carve out their own path, which they would otherwise perhaps do just walking from desk to desk, and that's really not possible now. So that also makes them more familiar with the digital structures, so to speak, of the company. So that's something that I enjoyed doing, and we tied that together at the end of the week. So it was recently, we just referred to it like we have a weekender meeting on Friday just to see everybody, to hang out a little bit, to compensate for the lack of social contact that you have, that you would have in the office normally. We end the week together in a giant Zoom call where everybody does fun stuff together. And we conduct experiments in doing online things. Anyway, one of the things there was also a quiz. So that's also a way to tie that in and to share the experience that the new joiners go through with the rest of the company, so that you not only onboard one group on the other, but you group them both together, or onboard them both together, rather. So we made it into a Kahoot quiz. That's something quite simple that you can do yourself or have possibly already done. But these same questions are really great input to see, do our regular people, or not regular, but people that have been working with us for years, actually also know the answers to these questions. So then that's another way of leveling the playing field, sharing the experience, and having a little bit of fun there with it. So doing that sort of stuff can really help the experience, and it's not that hard to put together. In addition to that, you need these activities for people to enjoy together. Welcome new joiners in the meantime to the session. we're relating different topics or different perspectives on onboarding new joiners. And we've come to the part of like the first week or weeks at a new company. We just talked about this, some team building activities that get a whole different like perspective or different content than they would normally have, right? You can't go karting or to an escape room or something like that. What we had in mind was playing Counter-Strike together, right? So it felt like a good idea at the time, and even people that haven't played games for a long time, such as Adriaan, who just shared his age with us, or age bracket at the very least, they could join in. But then that also takes some preparation, because as it turns out, if you have to like download that game on the spot, of course it's what gamers would call a noob mistake, it will take a while, and not everybody has a big fiber optic connection or something like that. So if you have to do that on the spot, it won't work. So that requires a different kind of preparation. So making use of these online tools is always an interesting idea, an opportunity, but it's also really useful to provide a fallback, or to make sure that if you play a game, just use like a web-based text adventure type thing that you can join in together. Because if people have to then understand like the overwhelming experience of downloading a new game or something like that, at least do it up front, or build in sufficient time to do that. So that's a kind of takeaway that we had as well from that perspective. Now I'm doing a bit of talking, but to keep it a bit more exciting, what we wanted to do is have a roundtable about these topics, because we've just heard from Adriaan as the COO of Hyarchis, involved in the whole timeline of new joining. And there's Mantas, our colleague, who has actually joined while we were in lockdown together. And then there's me trying to come up with games to play. Some things worked, others maybe didn't work. And what I want to do is like start off with a question to the other two, and then we will spend the next 10 or so minutes going through a set of these questions. And please feel free to join in. So if you heard something here and you think, okay, sounds good, but how did they actually do that? Or what would they take away from this experience or remove? Please use the chat function in Zoom. Maybe there's a very specific thing that you want to cover and you want to know how these guys did it. Drop it in the chat and we'll take it along. And then the first thing that I would like to ask is, Mantas, what's one thing that didn't go as expected, or that you would like to do differently if you get new colleagues to join you now that you're part of Hyarchis?
So I guess this one's somewhat double-edged in a way that it didn't go entirely right, but by it not going entirely right, it had some positives on its own. So I guess a prime example would be absorbing new information. Whenever you're onboarded, let's say you sit next to your manager or whoever's training you, and they're teaching you how to do X, Y, Z. If you have any questions, you usually ask the person, and depending on the time you've got available, the person will more often than not, well, come over and show you how to do it, or stand over your shoulder and just basically do it for you. This wasn't really an option. So all of the things we're trying to set up, well, I was trying to set up, I was just given, pre-dry documentation. Well, that's what installation documentation is, isn't it? And yeah, I had to have a crack at it on my own. So half an hour, 45 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, I'm just sat there doing my thing. And of course, whenever I run into issues, I would poke someone for some suggestions. People would, we would go on a call, people would take control of my screen, click a few things once in a while, but still, it allowed me to absorb information much more efficiently, because I didn't have any other choice but to do all of those things myself. And only when I would hit a wall, I would I would proceed to call someone for actual help, versus someone just standing there over your shoulder and, you're never getting to that wall. So yeah, you're basically not going as deep when you're learning new things, is what I'm trying to say, within the office versus now remotely.
Clear. So is that something you would also recommend to people joining us today? And how would you put that as an advice?
Most definitely. I would say, even when within the office, let's say I would be in charge of some new hires, if I would get someone working with me, I would purposely provide them with the documentation and try not to stand over their shoulder, making sure they're doing everything right. Or if they come over to me with a question, sure, I'll give them an answer. But if they come up with the same question again, rather than telling them the same thing again, you would refer them back to the documentation, which in the office sometimes is a little bit difficult to do because you already know that information and you just want to help the person.
Mm-hmm.
Whilst if the person just sends you a message or anything, it's pretty easy to just go, yeah, it's this paragraph within this document.
Clear. Yeah, so to make use of the barriers that exist for given our context.
Yeah, I generally feel it makes it much more efficient to absorb the information if you have a good crack at it yourself.
Clear. Cool. Adriaan, is there something similar related to this? Have you been able to RTFM someone as well during this experience?
Yeah, I think if you ask what would I definitely do differently, like we have this very nice onboarding schedule that basically has a lot of gaps in it, where you can take a coffee break, digest things and everything. And we were looking at that onboarding program by the time Mantas joined. And we're thinking, yeah, but what are they actually going to do back home, when they have a 2-hour gap, basically? How are they going to entertain themselves on the second or the first day? Yeah, then you need to have a big cup, Thomas, if you want to keep on drinking tea for 2 hours. So we were thinking, it might be a good idea to actually merge that schedule that we usually divide over 5 days into 3 days. So, we asked our HR girl to do that. And then I was looking at the schedule basically that followed from that. And I was like, gosh, that's basically like back-to-back meetings, not even talking about the work that the people who need to onboard the newcomers, actually need to do apart from onboarding the newcomers. So I was like, yeah. So I think the conclusion there is that we sort of over-demanded time from the people on our side who needed to do the handover. That was one thing. Work therefore remained untouched that had to be touched during those days. Plus, I think there was a bit of an overhaul in terms of information going towards the newcomers. So, if you would like to put it slightly philosophical, I would say embrace the void, like just let the emptiness basically be and allow people to digest. And I think Mantas is a good example because as a system analyst, he is more or less following our engineering manager who takes care of the entire product development cycle. And basically what Mantas is trying to do now remotely is trying to shadow Justinas, our engineering manager. And he says that he doesn't like anyone looking over his shoulder too much and that he would not do that. Well, that's actually exactly the thing he's doing now remotely with Justinas, like looking over his shoulder like all the time. So I think that what I've learned there is that I think if you hire the right people, that what it stands by, of course, you need to trust them basically to take their own initiative to find their way rather than feeling that you need to take them by the hand and therefore have the risk of giving too much information and asking too much of the people who need to do the handover, basically. I think that would be the one thing I would do differently.
And that's a good takeaway, of course, but it also goes towards making it a more active experience or having people be proactive about that. But going back to your first point, because you mentioned something about like cramming too much into short period of time or a relatively short period of time, you also have to build in a little bit of a gap for the absorption and the reflection on that information. Like based on the experience so far, what would you advise in terms of, let's say, the high tide and the low tide in the attention span? Is there a particular duration that you feel has worked well or can be improved?
Yeah, like for me, also now 5th week in lockdown, I really start feeling like some sort of exhaustion about the amount of screen time that I'm having, especially when the usual break the day kind of moments of grabbing a coffee or just making some fun with colleagues around like misses. Yeah, I think that's the typical moment of time where you sort of like put your mind to rest and gain energy for new sessions. At home, that's a lot more difficult. So I personally think that the gaps in between meetings should be bigger. So I'm trying to avoid any sort of back-to-back meetings as much as I can right now. I think another thing is that in terms of duration, 2 hours, like absolute max, but even trying like for regular meetings to cut that down to half an hour, 3/4 of an hour, where, in the usual office context, we would do that for a full hour. So just shortening the time, everyone, of course, there's a bigger need. I notice also for all the social talk, for all the, daily updates about the weather and about how kids are doing, etc. So that at one hand, there's a paradox there that I have not entirely solved for myself, really, that I see a bigger need for this sort of small talk. But at the same time, there is a I would say a need for also for cutting down the meeting time that you dedicatedly have behind your screen. So not sure if that answered the question entirely, Thomas.
I think it provides a good inroad into what's going on. I'm of course asking these questions to get a little bit more to the deeper layer, like why did things work quite well, so that we can take it along as takeaways here. So that's also something to relate to your own experience for you as the participant here, right?
Yeah.
So not just for us. So
yeah.
how the onboarding is now going on. Is there a way for you as an employer to verify, so to speak, that has gone according to plan, or is there a way that you can compare the experience to the onboarding of people like locally and what comes out of it?
Yeah, so I think what I wanted to add still to I think also one of the things that I really notice in Mantas, like you typically have this onboarding program and you really feel that you need to give like X amount of information to a person in order for them to be able, to start working in the role that they have. And I think that in these times, perhaps more so than in the office, I think that the sort of rather than having the onboarding program driven by the perceived need of sending information to someone, I think it becomes more important to just basically put that initiative more at the end of the employee, because it's less clear how much of what you send over to that employee in the remote context actually lands. So I think that Mantas is a very good example thereof, because he kind of flipped it around totally, like in the second week. And he started basically onboarding himself, like, guys, great job, but this can be done better. Just let it all up to me and I will find my way myself, basically. And I thought it was very nice to see, and sort of opened my eyes also for the understanding that, it's very easy to presume that as long as you give X amount of information, that should be the sort of cornerstone of that person being able to function in the role that he has. Well, on the other hand, actually, you might not be covering the actual needs that that person has. And it's a lot more difficult for that person to address that when he's constantly in meetings where he's supposed to absorb rather than to inquire, really.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that. I guess the main point of advice I would give to any new joiner or anyone onboarding new joiners is to push them to ask questions. I'm one of those people. Well, I'm a strong believer that there's no such thing as a stupid question. And if someone gets offended by a question, maybe the problem is on the other end rather than you or whoever asked the question. But yeah, whenever you don't know something, and if it's something new, just always ask the question. Because otherwise it's really easy. I guess it's really easy to feel, what's the word, distanced when you're trying to absorb something remotely in a way. Well, no, not distanced. You feel somewhat silly. I don't know this thing, whilst my colleagues have been doing these things for 2, 5, 10, 20, whatever years. I'll look stupid if I ask this. So I guess I had a lot of very positive information from pretty much anyone who I interacted with, because yes, a few times I did feel like this seems really basic, and yes, I've already asked about these things 2 times. But when it's remote, you don't really have any way of twisting the question to not make it sound like you're asking the same question. So you kind of just have to suck it up and go, hey, Justina, sorry, I know I've asked this of you 2, 3 times already, but I still don't fully understand it. Can you, explain it to me once again or slightly differently? And yeah, each and single time, both my line manager and anyone I've interacted with, they've been incredibly helpful. They answered all of my questions. And yeah, I guess the bottom line is if you've got a new joiner, new starter, someone you're onboarding, just once a day, once every few days, or just go, hey, have you got any questions? Or, hey, this thing that we went over, do you understand it? Is there anything you would like me to expand on? And those things, I mean, I'm 2.5 weeks in and I'm somewhat getting there, and I'm really enjoying myself. I feel like I'm part of the team, even though I've met one person or 2 people of the team directly.
Cool. The daily check-ins to verify, okay, is everything on track? Also means that you don't have to necessarily spend the whole day together in a call, but to keep checking in is of course a good practice there. It's nice to hear that it's working. I'm curious also to see like how do you actually do that, right? Are there particular tools or platforms that you use in order to achieve that? Everybody has their own like digital ecosystem, of course, but I'm curious to see, especially from the perspective of the both of you, like you, Mantas, as someone new to the company, having to get onboarded on all kinds of tools, what works particularly well and what maybe could be improved. And then in the second version, I'm also curious how that is for Adriaan. But maybe first for you, Mantas.
So everyone's been using Microsoft Teams. It's similar to Skype, Discord, Slack, the usual where you can just chat to people. And it's worked wonders. It's really nice to have the digital stand-ups, for example. So once a day, the whole development team gets together. The initial 2-3 minutes until we're waiting for everyone to join. It's, hey, how's the weather today? What did you have for food? How was Easter? How was your weekend of at home? Well, just casual chit chat, which doesn't really feel any different than it would within the office if I knew what the office looked like. And yeah, just being able to message anyone. Sure, I needed to make a few notes initially, who does what, or needed to message a few people saying, hey, I've got a question regarding this, who I should be poking. But yeah, genuinely 2.5 weeks in, and I don't really have any negative things to say. Things are working, as long as, yes, I did need to put a fair bit of effort from my own side in a way where it's, I'm sat at home, I'm a new starter. It's easy to just pretend I'm not, I'm busy and actually I'm not, and disappear to make.
Wait, you do that? Mantas, we thought that the whole 2-week experience was very different there from you. But okay.
That's exactly what I'm saying. It in the worst case scenario, that's what people would think someone would do, but it falls a lot on my own shoulders not to do that, be interested and just be proactive in looking for things to do. And turns out that people were really happy to give me things to do, and it's turned out well.
Cool. Yeah, that covers an even broader set of topics, but that's a good inroad to how to get to work together. Adriaan, just to close off this part, anything that you terribly rely on in order to make things go smoothly from a tools perspective, or otherwise an interactive thing?
Yeah, from a tools perspective, I think one of the main tools that we started using is Miro. So it's basically a sort of infinite whiteboard where you can throw like a bunch of stickies around different topics and things like that. So from team boarding to project onboarding to brainstorming, we do a lot of those things actually in Miro, which is like super convenient and really gives you the possibility also of not only having the whiteboard, but simultaneously also having the video interaction there. I think cameras always on is also one of those practices that we really adhere to, because it's very tempting, especially in sitting behind your computer all day, to start typing emails, start doing other things, and when you have your camera on, that easily becomes visible that you're doing that. So that makes it kind of less tempting to start doing these things, because you'd be the odd one out, clearly doing some other stuff while everyone's engaged in the meeting. So there's some, if you would put it negatively, some social shaming involved there. The same goes for Miro, which is quite funny, because I'm typically such a guy who writes a lot of stuff during meetings, so I'm typically the one that's being caught. And on Miro, it's very nice because you can see everyone's cursor, like with the name attached to it. And the funny part is that that if you don't move your cursor, then you see everyone being in one place on the Miro board, except that one dude that was his email, being me, basically. That was the interesting part, is that you get caught basically doing these kind of things, which is of course not the aim of doing it. Don't get me wrong. It's some micromanagement to make sure that everyone's like literally on the same page, but it just helps to engage people in the activity that they're involved in, because they understand that it's sort of requested from them and it's desired from them that they participate, and it's visible whether they do or they do not. So a Miro board for me is one of the things. Just making sure cameras are always on is another thing. And another board that we're using quite a lot, but we're using already actually, was Stormboard, also one of those digital whiteboard tools that we heavily rely on. We ourselves work with teams within our organization. It's always a challenge to make people stop using private chats and start making them use channels. And I think if anything, then the lack of catching information at the coffee table is, or at the coffee machine, I think just increases the desire to be informed, and at the other hand, to inform people in an equal way. So that means that channels finally started to become a thing in our company, which always sort of were half dead or not used, or used once upon a time. So that's also one of the things that really helped actually this Corona crisis. It's really invigorated our use of Teams in a proper way.
Clear. It's nice to hear about this tech stack as well. Still, you may have to make use of the technology as well, but it helps level the playing field. And I think that's one of the key terms that we're hearing today. So leveling that playing field for collaboration really helps, just for your existing teams, but definitely also for getting a good inroad for new joiners as well. And pulling everything to the team level is then an extra benefit, so to speak. I'm taking a look at the clock, and you can already see my cursor hovering here on the slide that we were sharing about the roundtable. And what I would like to do is actually skip towards the onboarding advice that we have, and I need to reshare my presentation. There's the perils of actually doing something precisely such as Adriaan was saying, while something is going on, quickly editing some stuff, and this comes back to bite me or haunt me in a nicer way. I'll quickly open my share again, and of course what I was doing was trying to incorporate the advice that we just heard, or the takeaways that you just gave, so that we had that in our slide. Now we have it. I have to reshare it. So professional. See, things change on the fly, and you need to be able to respond to it quickly. It's super agile. The thing is as follows. I wrote along with some of the conclusions that we were coming towards, right? So this is to wrap it up. optimizing for active participation with a knowledge transfer backlog, but also like various ways of stimulating people to do their thing and actually go after the knowledge will make it land much better than just pushing it onto them, so to speak. And the level playing fields that we're referring to a lot, it gives you many opportunities, and I hope that we covered some of them to some extent that it's useful for you. And what I wanted to suggest was maybe I missed something here, and let's annotate this page together. There's an option in Zoom at the top of your screen. There is something called View Options, and there's an Annotate button. And if you open that up, and that's also useful for your own meetings, you get a whole set of like edit tools. For instance, you can put like little ticks on the screen. I hope that you're seeing it as well. This is something that you can also do. And then of course you can clear everything. Here we go. Is there something that we've missed? Add yours. Over communication is key, right? Someone, yes. Amazing. I always like talking over what I'm doing is never a good idea. And then of course people are already starting to do the thing, which is fantastic. So over communication. Like if you have the feeling that maybe you are communicating a bit too much or saying too many things, that's probably the right amount that you want to be going for, because people are missing a lot of cues, right? So we talk about not being in the office, but it's the same as being in a meeting together in a visual space. You keep the camera on because otherwise you miss the visual cues. But at the same time, you can't hear somebody's stomach growling when they're hungry, that sort of stuff. So over communicate about that. Maybe not about the stomach, but other things for sure. Keep meetings short, allocate time for social talk. Definitely a good one, right? Everybody's in the same thing. It's good to have a common landing. It doesn't have to just be about the weather, but maybe you're also entertaining your kids in the meantime or helping them do their work. Motivate, asking questions. Yes. To do so, use Zoom for seeing everyone on one screen. It's a good. We had the daily check-ins as well, or an opportunity to do so for the onboarding. Perhaps some good advice relating to like the part of the timeline before the actual joining. What definitely needs to happen beforehand. I got as far as delivering the welcome packs before day one. So if you are such a cool company that you have chocolates for your joiner, perhaps this is great to have before the first day rather than like somewhere midweek after they're already starting. But that takes some preparation. So think about the logistics of that. Let alone if you want to have branded hoodies or something like that, right? When do you need to know their hoodie size? It's a weird thing. I don't think it's legally okay to ask people, hey, what's your shirt size during an onboarding or a session? So careful with that. But think ahead on this. So take it from the perspective of your joiner. Anything else? If there are no other things, team-wide communication channels. I wrote it. Don't forget to check in on each other. How are you doing? Could go a long way. Hey, and all of these things that we're noting down, it's a wonderful thing to add, right? Because it makes a better human connection, and that's also super important because it's something that's gonna help you out, even if we're going back to an office at some point, right? So this is not necessarily a practice to get into while you're in a distributed context, but it's just gonna make the experience better for people while working. So it's super good to note this. And if you have a specific like online focused topic here, think about how you can translate that to the like the physical world, right? So it's the same principle that's underneath it. How can it be applied in the real world, quote unquote? Here, someone says, ask questions, but don't over micromanage. Oh my goodness, I'm gonna put a tick there as well on a heart. Boop, boop. I also like that the person writing that didn't just say micromanage, but over micromanage. This speaks to some experience of the bad kind. Yeah, that's a good one. you heard us about like trying to find our own way. That's super important. But then it takes a bit of balancing to see, are you doing enough of it or not enough? And for that reason, it helps to put it in terms of an expectation or a context, so that you can look back on it and see, okay, did we achieve what we thought we would achieve? What's the outcome that you thought it would have? And in the same way that we're the three of us here in this webinar, you can do the same thing in your office as well, right? To just involve the new joiners and see, okay, what worked for you and what didn't work. Those are super direct and blunt questions, so maybe you can find a nicer way to package that. But part of the onboarding experience is a wonderful way, or is a wonderful opportunity for a feedback loop as well, to see, okay, did it work? Did it do what I thought it would? And how was it for you? So that you can improve for the next one. And who better to say that than someone who has just been through the entire experience on the receiving end, so to speak. So make use of that as well. And there's also about, somebody wrote transparency about your work. That's very good.
Yeah, Thomas, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to break in on
No, I want to go like filibuster. Sorry, Adam, please go ahead.
No, because the over micromanagement kind of triggered me, because I sometimes even have a sore throat at the end of the day because of all the extra communication I need to do on days like this, because it's not apparent that you see things happening. Like, for example, those onboarding packages is a good example, I guess. Like, at some point you need to understand that someone has not only received them, but made them and sent them. And typically in the office, you would see those things happening and come by. But now I think the realization that those things are not being seen, basically, it becomes more important to start visualize basically what things you are working on and what's the status there, because it's, from my point of view as an employer, it would significantly ease up my life, because I have to communicate 10 times less, because I am kind of in the know about things happening, which requires, of course, active logging of things and active and transparency in general about things happening, things not happening. So yeah, I feel that micromanagement thing triggered me, because I feel I'm doing that a lot, because I'm just not aware of things happening, basically. So it's kind of trying to just understand, not wanting to control things, but trying to understand whether things are under control by our people, basically. I think that's how I experience them.
Cool. I'm glad that you broke into my rant, trying to narrate what's already clearly on the screen. Mantas, perhaps?
I can only agree with that. I mean, over micromanagement is never good. In some cases, micromanagement is not something certain people want, full stop. But I've had a lot of people check in on me. I've had a lot of things presented to me, thrown my way, and I loved it. I mean, there was a lot, because you can't really do much other than micromanagement when you're working remotely. But if someone kept on sending me messages every 45 minutes saying, "Hey, how are you doing? Hi, how are you doing?" That would be too much. But yeah, healthy micromanagement in this current climate is definitely something that I would say is very much needed.
I think that was a mic drop moment, if ever there was one.
Did you not hear the end of me?
I did. Oh no, I'm super sorry. This is me trying to be funny. I thought I did hear the end, and I thought it was such good advice. I thought, okay, I'm looking for a good way to close it off. So sorry, Mantas. Yeah, I think it's really good, right? What you mentioned about this balance, to not go crazy with it. I think that's very healthy to keep in mind. So I'm glad that there's like such an emphasis on being transparent about what's going on, right? Checking in, but not overdoing that sort of thing, right? For you, for our viewers at home, there's always a difficult balance to strike, right? And we don't have the magic formula, but we can only relate to you how that has been. So compare it to your own experience and take it along. And on that note, taking a look at the time, I think it's time to close it off. So I'm going to save this screenshot, bloop, and then shut up and basically give the microphone to Adriaan to close us off for today.
Yeah, thanks, Thomas. Thanks a lot for hosting our little webinar. Also, everyone in attendance, thank you very much for sharing time in your no doubt busy schedules to join us here today. It has been very nice to have you. I hope that what we've shared with you will be or could be of any help for you in these pretty extraordinary times, let's say. So all I hope is that we have been able to either give you some takeaways that are useful, inspiring. I think always is a very big word, but perhaps, we have even been able to do something like that. Who knows? But thanks all of you for being here. I'm wishing you the best of luck in the weeks to come with all the homework and all the challenges that poses to us. And hope to see you next time in the next webinar. And I think, Thomas, I'm not mistaking, handouts / recording will be sent to everyone who participated today, right?
Yes, I'll try to compress it a little bit, but you get the golden nuggets for sure. So thank you for that.
Right, perfect. Thank you all and have a good day, I would say.